everyone, and welcome to our bi-weekly book talks. Tonight, you'll see that I'm in a little bit of a different room. I'll be honest, I'm real tired of being in my office all day, and there's only so many times I can look and see the camera behind me and see my office. So I'm trying it out. The weather's been kind of cold. It was snowy. Perfect weather for me to curl up by the fireplace with a blanket and get some reading done. And it worked out perfectly because I have one of my new top favorites that I'm going to talk about tonight that I love. And I sat here in front of the fire and read it in a day because I absolutely loved it. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. And the first book I'm going to talk about tonight is Lore by Alexandra Bracken. This showed up, as most of my books do, on my Amazon list of people who have purchased books you have purchased this also. And so I read the description, and automatically from the description, I was like, this is a book I'm going to dig 100%. I love mythology. I love Greek and Roman mythology. In fact, many of my ninth graders would probably hate to hear me say this, but I actually didn't mind reading the Odyssey because I dig the story of the Odyssey. I dig the story of gods and goddesses and heroes and fighting to the death. And, I love it all. Love it all. Movies, everything. Read all the Percy Jacksons, love them. All the Lost Hero series, love them. Even his new, with Asgard and whatnot. It's great. So when I read this synopsis, I was like, I gotta look into this. So our main character in this book is Melora Perseus, and she hails from the line in the descendants of Perseus. So what it is that we have 9 original gods, and Zeus has created this battle that every 7 years the gods become human. The gods and goddesses become human. And the descendants of the heroes are able to fight a god who is now mortal. And if they sweat the killing blow, they inherit the god's powers and become the new god. So in this book, we have the lines of Odysseus, Perseus, Theseus, and Achilles. We have these lines of heroes. And Melora, she goes by Lore, is the only one left of hers because 7 years ago, the day that the Aegon ended, that's the fight for every 7 years, for 7 days when the gods are mortal, her family was slaughtered. Her 2 younger sisters and both her parents, and they were the last descendants. So now Melora she wants her name to go down in history. She wants to be a legend. And so she gets pulled into the fight, even though she wanted to step away from it. And Athena plays a huge part in this, really great. Anything you know about gods and goddesses, you know that they're not always liked by humans, and they're not, they like to use just humans and mortals as playthings. The one thing I really dug about the book is that the rules for the Aegon, it's only the male descendants can reap the powers of the gods. So the females can go out and do some, harming and maiming, but the killing blow needs to come from a male because it's the male line that needs to keep the gods. So then eventually we have all the goddesses are now becoming their males reincarnated. So somebody might have the power of Aphrodite, but it's a dude. I really liked it because it takes in this idea of the role of women into the book, and it gives a different spin on the story of Medusa, which, if you know your mythology, Athena plays a part with for Medusa, and hence the cover of the book. Because the one thing that I did, all the houses of the heroes wear masks to cover their face to represent their house, and Lore's house of Perseus has the Medusa face with the snakes. It's pretty cool. I 100% love it. I gave it 5 out of 5. It is probably my top book of 2020 and 2021 so far. So for me, that's pretty high praise. Trust me, it really is. So check it out, Lore by Alexandra Bracken. I wouldn't even be upset if it became a series. That's how much I love it. And now on to my friend Katie.
Thank you. Hello, listeners, watchers, viewers of our Forever Young Adult Lovers of YA Lit bi-weekly book talks. So today, my book talk is going to be by one of my easily top 10 favorite authors, Marissa Mayer. We've talked about her a bunch. She wrote my top favorite series, The Lunar Chronicles. She's written a standalone Alice in Wonderland novel. So last year, she had a new book come out called Instant Karma. Instant Karma is about two kids, Prudence Barnett and her partner, Quint Erickson. They are, and by partner, I mean they're school partners. The story starts out when they're lab partners in their marine biology class because they live in a cute little beach community town. And Quint is the worst lab partner Prudence has ever worked with. He's lazy, he's late, he's that, I'm going to be friends with everybody in class, and he never does his work. And Prudence is the epitome of overachiever, A+ perfect student. So they have to do a report together, and she thinks Quint has just bombed his side of the report. Turns out their high school teacher gave her a C on the project because it looked very clearly to him, as we all teachers know, that you didn't work together. And we can tell. Teachers can tell when you don't work together on a project. So Prudence strikes a deal with Quint that if she volunteers at the animal rescue center where that he and his mom founded, he will work on the project with her over the summer and resubmit it for a better grade. But romance ensues. She can't believe she's falling for Quint. He's not her type. Well, she doesn't actually know if he's her type because she doesn't have a type. But if she did, it wasn't going to be Quint Erickson. He's just too charming, and he's just so distracting from all the things. So Prudence is very uptight. I don't know if I've made that point clear yet, but Prudence is very overachieving, uptight. One day, her and her twin brother, Jude, and their friends go to the new karaoke spot at their favorite restaurant. Prudence sings this song, Instant Karma, by the Beatles, because her whole family is obsessed with the Beatles. She falls and hits her head, develops the power of instant karma. So she abuses it for a little while, seeing people littering out on the beach, on the boardwalk, and then somebody gets a pigeon pooping on them. You know, if you're mean to a little kid or you cut in line and then all of a sudden your ice cream spills on your lap, Prudence is responsible for some of these things. But with great power always comes great responsibility, and Prudence starts to see the consequences of her actions on people that she knows, people she cares about. Yeah. This book was adorable. Adorable. Listen, if you're just new to our website, my name is Katie, and I love scary things and sci-fi and fantasy novels. But two things can exist at once. And I also sometimes love me a schmoopy rom-com teen novel. And this delivered that in spades. It reminded me a lot of, my friend Adrian did a book talk on this last summer, I think, about this cute little book, Today, Tonight, Tomorrow, which is about two teenagers who couldn't be further from together. They're the opposite personalities, and they run around Seattle trying to achieve this mission for senior class. Adrian described it so well as being almost like a love letter again to Seattle, and Seattle's sort of its own character in this novel. Their beach town is also its own little character in this novel. You get to see the boardwalk. Prudence's parents run a record store that's like a landmark on the boardwalk. Like I said, Quint's mom and Quint run an animal rescue center where most of the novel is spent for the summer. So you get to see the love of animals and the love of the ocean and the love of the beach just as much as we get to see the love between Quint and Prudence blossom over the novel. Yeah, I spoiled it. They get together. It's a romance novel. Get over it. So Marissa Mayer delivered again. Instant Karma. It's real cute. I gave it a 4 out of 5. If you need something light, it's easy to read. It's real cute. Instant Karma, Marissa Mayer. So next is my friend Steve.
Hi guys, I'm Steve, and my first book I'm going to talk about tonight. Let me actually have a slideshow so I could present to you. I think it's worth mentioning to reinforce what Misty talked about as readers, lovers, bibliophiles, if you will. I think it's valuable to discuss how we choose books and how books get recommended to us and all those kind of things. Well, this book that I read recently is called Punching the Air, 386-page realistic novel co-authored by Ibi Zoboi and Youssef Salaam of the Exonerated Five. So this Youssef Salaam, that was the name that pulled me into the book. And then the back of the book, I always look at those little blurbs, especially if they're by authors of books I've read. For instance, Jacqueline Woodson, she's written books like Brown Girl Dreaming. Ibram Kendi's written Stamped and How to Be an Anti-Racist. And Jason Reynolds, some of us have talked about his books like All the Way Down or All American Boys. These are three great authors. I don't even need to read this. If it's just their names and they're saying anything good about this book, I'm going to like it. And I was right. So a little bit of just super quick background about these authors. I don't know Ibi Zoboi, but she's a rising young adult author. But I do know Dr. Youssef Salaam because last year I watched a docuseries on Netflix called When They See Us, which is the story of injustice for the Central Park Five. He was one of those kids in 1989 that was basically racially profiled for a sexual assault mugging of a white female, and him and four of his friends were racially profiled and were locked up in jail and for 7 to 13 years, and the sentences weren't overturned until 2002, till New York City paid them off with a huge multi-million-dollar settlement and everything. And now he's doing prison reform talks and all this stuff for social justice and racial equality and stuff. So my point is, inspired by his life is this book, right? So it's the story, there's a lot of parallels to his life, and I think that's what makes this book authentic. It's the story of Amal, a 16-year-old bright kid who is an artist, and he's into poetry, but he's feeling some injustice and some not fitting in certain areas of his life. Like he's in an AP art class, but there's a lot of him challenging like the status quo, like, why do we need to learn about this? Who gets to decide what I get to learn about art? Like, the traditional way that of the canon, of the artistic canon for like an AP art history class. But the inciting incident in the book, anyways, is him and his friends go out to play basketball in a gentrified neighborhood, and an unfortunate incident happens, and he gets arrested and locked up in juvenile detention. And then this book is the story of how he copes with that. Hence, Punching the Air, the frustration, right? This captures everything. This is like what it's like to be locked up, especially unjustly. Doing the emotional stress of dealing with that, the getting into fights, trying to, deal with that injustice, deal with the bully, the kid who's beating him up, but then it ultimately becomes a story about the power of art and poetry that can transcend and the human spirit to basically make something of yourself when you face injustice or when you're locked up. And it really just feels authentic. And I loved it. And it's written in verse form, so it reads really quick, and it's just got this lyricism to it, right? That's like for fans of poetry and rap. And if you read something, like The Hate U Give, books that have like, a social justice or important social issue, this is the book for you. I don't want to mislead you though, that this book is like preachy or about that. You really get connected to Amal, and he's really humanized. You feel sympathetic for him. And yeah, I was kind of surprised. I'm into art. I'm like, I kind of learned a couple cool things about art. I was impressed. I think the lyricism of the rapping and poetry is legit. It's credible. Fans of hip hop would be like, yeah, they approve of those parts. And it just captures what it's like. How does he deal with this? Well, this book, you gotta read to see just how he comes through it all. I don't want to totally spoil it for you, but this is an up and coming book. It's getting a lot of critical acclaim. That's it. I'm gonna move on to Adrienne. Take it away.
Thank you, Steve. I don't know if you can see me with the thing. My first story is Crush by Tracy Wolff. This is the second one in a series, and it follows Crave, which I reviewed a few months ago. When I read Crave, one of the things that I thought was really funny and I enjoyed about it was there's a lot of comical nods to other vampire series like Vampire Diaries, Twilight, and even the TV show Legacies. So it kind of felt like another one of those series. People either loved that aspect of it or they hated it. I loved it because I couldn't wait for the second book. We get Crush and something amazing happens. It turns into kind of its own book. It manages to stay the paranormal school story from the first book, but it felt separate from all the other vampire stories. It really stands on its own. The story's about Grace, and it happens fairly soon after the end of Crave, in which she is at this paranormal school. She's the only human, but in the very end of the book, she finds out that she's actually a gargoyle. She thinks this is happening right after when Crave ended, but unbeknownst to her, she has been kind of frozen in her gargoyle stone form for 4 months. So she's missed 4 months. All the other paranormals and the teachers at the school have been trying to figure out how to get her out of gargoyle form. And one day she just wakes up and goes to her class, which of course is 4 months later, and she doesn't understand why everybody's freaking out about it. I kept trying to guess. This is one of those ones that looks really thick, but it's a really quick read, just the way the pages are set up. I kept thinking I knew what was going to happen. I guessed on a couple of things, which is normal when you read a series, but a lot of the things really surprised me, which I love being surprised by a book. There ends up being kind of a triangle. People come back from that they thought they were characters that thought they were dead. It's just, I loved it. A ridiculous amount. Most of the time, one thing I liked was the romance in the book. You often see in teenage romances, either they get along great or there's the just big fights. But this had a lot of like kind of just the normal bickering back and forth of a relationship, but it was actually really funny to read too. Grace also fights for her own equality. In the magic school, there are vampires, werewolves, and dragons. And Grace is the first gargoyle in hundreds of years. And everybody kind of treats her with kids' gloves, and she ends up standing up for herself, which is really awesome. She gets frustrated because people don't think that she's capable of things. So the reader becomes invested in her gaining this amount of self-sufficiency and having people believe that she can do things on her own. There's also a character in here that you hated the mention of in the first book, and you end up loving him by the end of it. So that's always kind of interesting and funny. And he kind of redeems himself. I think Crush showed us that there's a monster in everybody, and it's kind of what you do with that monster. So I really liked that aspect of it. You need to listen to what's inside you, and it's the best of us and the worst of us at the same time. It also shows you the consequences of not paying attention to your voices inside you. So I loved it. I love the series so much. I can't wait for the next book. And now on to Deborah.
Okay, I see my friend Katie's getting her prop because tonight's book is Legend Born by Tracy Dion. And the legend is, go Katie, go, Excalibur and King Arthur. So notice her, she pulls it from the stone. So we all know the King Arthur story. It's been around for a little while. So this is a brand new book. It just came out last year in 2020. And it is very clear that it's just the beginning of a series, because the way the book ends, you're going, okay, well, that was number one. I don't know how many there are. I know she's working on number 2 right now. and there may be more. Brand new author, Tracy Dion. And this book has everything about the whole Arthur thing. There's Excalibur, there's Lancelot, there's Merlin, there's Arthur, but a slightly different form. So our protagonist is Bree Matthews. She is a young Black teenage girl who is going to a pre-college academy at the University of North Carolina, which is coincidentally where the author went to college. Go figure. And at this college, there's a whole secret society of mostly white guys who are of the bloodline of Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. So there's a whole bunch of magic involved. There's magic pulled from the air, ether magic. There's blood magic. There's Southern Black girl root magic. There's all kinds of magic. And Bree has to figure out where she fits in the whole magical scheme of things. Naturally, since it's a secret society of white guys, it's not your first guess that she's going to fit into this Arthur society, but it does end up in the end that kind of happens. There's romance, there's evil, there are things coming alive that should not be alive that we have to kill. And there's a very complex system of how the bloodlines interact with each other, the bloodlines of the Knights of the Round Table. So I read an article about Tracy Dion, the author, who said that she was a video game developer at some point. And she used her skills with video games to kind of develop this very complex organizational system where the rules of the society work. So that's kind of fun. I liked it. There was a lot of danger and romance. Bree has to discover what her connection is. And she also has to go back in history to slavery times to kind of figure out how her ancestors were treated and how they ended up playing a part in this Arthur legend. So it's pretty good. She's a good character. The plot is fun. It starts a little slow, but as you get into it, it starts to develop. You think, oh, okay, that's going to happen next. And there are a few twists and turns. I'm with Adrian. I like it when a book surprises me a little bit and I go, whoa, I didn't see that one coming. And I kind of liked Bree. She's a little bit angry at the beginning, but understandable. Her mom has just died. She has got a whole bunch of angst in her life. But by the end of the novel, I'm kind of liking her. And so I look forward to number 2. I give it about 4.5 stars, which is pretty high for me. I liked it. I'll read the next one. And I recommend it to you. I got it from the library. It's got a cool cover, Legendborn. And I'm going to pass it back to Misty.
Right on. Thanks, Deborah. Another book to add to my ever-growing list of books to read. Love me a good Arthur retelling, so I'm down for that. I talked about a book that I loved for my first book talk tonight. I loved it. I'm going to talk about a book that had a lot of hype. A lot of people were like, woo! And I saw the cover and I was like, yeah, I'm down for this. And I hated it. I don't give very many of 2 out of 5 star reviews. This one, I was feeling generous with the 2. The book I'm going to talk about is What Big Teeth. I read it because I signed up for NetGalley, so I get a lot of advanced reader copies known as ARCs. I can request them, and if the publisher feels as though they want my review, my opinion of it, they let me read the book before it's published. So What Big Teeth, again, love the cover. It's awesome. I mean, there's a lot going on that. Look at that. It looks seriously great, right? Thinking, oh my God, it's going to be about wolves and what big teeth. Harkens back, to Little Red Riding Hood 100%. So NetGalley sent it to me, and I listened to actually HarperCollins, a webinar when they were talking about their newest releases. And in the chat, people were like, what big teeth? Oh, it's awesome, da 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 da. So I was like, I'm down for it. I'm going to read it. Oh my God. It killed me. It was one of those, I know I am guilty. I have said this before in our book talks of life is too short. If you don't like the book, don't read it. However, because I was getting it from NetGalley, I felt obligated to finish it. And I really wanted to give it this idea of, okay, it's got to get better. It's got to get better. It doesn't completely. The problem is that the story is underdeveloped. You're plopped down into this world where monsters are, but I have no idea what's going on. The word werewolf is never mentioned at all, so I'm not even sure they're werewolves. There's a mom who she has to stay in the bathtub, like in a tub of water that follows her around because half her body is covered in pustules. And that just in itself makes me gross out totally, because imagine this woman with like and so it's just, I didn't like the main character. I thought she was whiny. It was, her backstory was never completely developed. Nobody's backstory was really developed, and so I was very disappointed. And I'm a smart person. I'm a smart girl. I really am. And I can usually, especially for YA, I can get it. I can see where the author's going. I can totally feel the world that's being built. No. Rose Sabo did not do this for me and for this book. I'm not even sure if it was the author's first book. It will not make me want to read another of her books at all. The only thing that would maybe intrigue me is if there was a sequel, which I don't think there would be because of the way it ends. I would maybe be interested in reading it because of the fact that I just want to see if it got any better. But after that, 50 pages, if it didn't, I'd be done. So keep in mind, not all books we're going to love. I wouldn't say that I hated it, just because if I hated it, I would have just stopped and been like, yeah, sorry, NetGalley, you don't get my review. But I did keep going. And so What Big Teeth by Rose Sabo. Look for it in stores in April. For some of you, it might completely connect and you might love it. And that's the great thing about reading, remember, is that just because I hate a book doesn't mean you hate a book. So keep that in mind. Give it a try, read a few pages, see what you think. And so now back to my friend. I think I'm going to Steve. Yep, here we go.
Hi, guys, again. My second book this time is a graphic novel, and kind of ironic you're talking about covers, Misty. This cover absolutely blew me away, and everything in the book blew me away, and I'm going to talk about that a lot. Let me present. It is a graphic novel, a science fiction called Bionic by Karen Shadmi. And I've only read one of his other graphic novels called The Abaddon, and that was a retelling of No Exit, if you're familiar with that Sartre play. Existential masterwork, and his retelling of it took place in an apartment building, and it was very weird and out there and dark and kind of twisted. So I was already a fan of this guy, but this is an original work by him. So I was curious to see if his original work is going to live up to, and it definitely did. Just this cover, the cover, and having known the author, but if I just saw this cover, I'd buy it. There's a lot going on there. What's going on there? Like the girl, she's part robot. There's the guy inside of her head. What type of story is this? It's like an accident. You don't want to look away. You want to look away, but you can't. It's like your morbid curiosity has been piqued. And definitely there's this weird morbid curiosity and kind of a macabre undertone to this book. Well, just this guy is very interesting. I think to do this justice, I got to tell you a little bit about this guy. So looking at his pictures, his art is very striking. There's a poignant social commentary effect to like all of his art. And that's through line in this story too, as a science fiction story, what it has to, he's making a comment about how technology and social media and things like that affect us. So some of his pictures, you can just really tell like he's making quite interesting statements through his art. And this isn't from the novel, but this will help you understand as I talk about the novel here. Kind of creepy, but also, whoa, I get what he's saying there, right? So I don't want to really spoil this book, but the basic premise is that there's a geeky kid a teenage kid named Victor, who, this is in the near future, advanced enough to where like robotic parts and bionic parts for people are much more advanced than they are now. But this kid, it's the next, he's a geeky kid. He doesn't fit in at school. He likes to repair like old video games, like old Nintendo systems and stuff. And he's never had a girlfriend, and he's socially awkward. And there's this beautiful girl, Patricia, and he kind of has a growing obsession with her. And it's more than just the cliche trope of nerdy guy likes the popular pretty girl, but both these characters have interesting, they're tortured in their own ways. His infatuation kind of turns into kind of a haunting obsession, but then she doesn't turn out to be anything like you would think she's like. There's something weird going on with her and her family story. And it just, this book surprises you in ways I didn't see coming. It is gritty in terms of, it feels authentic, like this is how teens talk and think, and how that obsession grows into kind of self-destructive element. Something I love about this book is the color palette. There's this sense of kind of a institutional pale green that no matter what is going on, it's kind of throughout the book. And I think that kind of hints at the undertone of what's really going on. Something I need to tell you, like you're thinking, why robot, right? Well, the girl gets into an accident, and then most of her body is replaced with robot parts. And once that happens, for some reason, she finally notices Victor, and they kind of start to have a relationship, and things kind of go in a weird direction. And then it becomes this great commentary on re-questioning what is love in our modern times. And it's just kind of, yeah, I can't say much more. It's a brilliant sequential art. Like I said, the color palette, the cartooning style is not too it's realism, but it has kind of still a little bit of this surreal element that's kind of like a little bit of like, it's kind of a little twisted, a little edgy. And the way this book, I mean, there are sequences in the first few images that you don't fully understand, and when you get to the end of the book, it all comes together. It has a nice twist, and then that twist lingers, and you're left with an aftertaste after reading this book. It will make you think. So I'm going to pass it off to Adrienne for her next book. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. The next book that I'm going to talk about is Teen Titans Beast Boy by Cami Garcia and Gabriel Piccolo. This is a YA origin story series from DC Inc. We've read some of them before and even reviewed some of them before. It shows superheroes before they were Titans and just kind of ordinary high school kids. Garfield Logan, who goes by Gar, he spent basically his entire life being overlooked. He lives in a small town called Eden, Georgia. He's 17. He has green streaks in his hair. He's trying to kind of fit in, but he also looks about 2 to 3 years younger than all of his peers, which he always has, and this has always really bothered him. He has two best friends that love him anyways, but he wants to kind of be in the popular crowd. So he wants to try to find a way to stand out. This is his senior year. It's almost over. He goes to Bull Creek High School, which made me laugh because it sounds very Southern. His two best friends, Stella and Tank, they kind of really don't understand why he cares what other people think because they really like him. But he's determined to fit in with this, the popular crowd and score the popular girl. But by the end of the year, he has this list that he made at the end of the junior year, and he's done nothing on his list, especially kiss this one girl that he likes. So Tank, who's obviously, that's his nickname, is a big guy, big football player, and he's been trying to kind of bulk him up by giving him exercises to do and monitoring his diet. he's been writing everything down. He still can't figure out why he's so small. His parents make him take this vitamin, they call it, every day. And that's the only thing that Gar can think of. So without kind of talking to his parents, he stops taking this vitamin, which is actually an amino acid. And then boom. So when he gets back to school the next day, he's taller, he's stronger, and he takes this dare to eat this hot ghost pepper at a local restaurant, and they film it, of course. And he becomes kind of popular for this week at school. So his social status soars, his voice drops, he's stronger, faster. But this popularity came as a price, because now he's Beast Boy. They were doing experiments, and he ended up getting bitten by this monkey when his parents were in Africa, and that's why he turned into this. And they were giving him the amino acid to kind of suppress this. So the dares keep getting bigger and bigger. The head of the big social clique, the head boy, is very angry that Gar is getting all this attention. So there's a whole side story there. So Gar realizes the extent of his physical changes, and he has to dig deep and figure out he has to struggle with his parents lying to him and not telling him the truth. I think that this origin story suited Gar perfectly. It's not an action-packed superhero book. It's kind of more him coming to terms with his life, dealing with normal things everyone does growing up. And the discovering of his powers is kind of secondary to his personal growth. There's great side characters as well. There's a learning disability side story with Tank that was handled really well. It wasn't my favorite one in the series, but I really liked it. I give it a solid 4 out of 5. And it did flow well with the other books in the series, and it kind of explained some of the gaps that were missing. So I really liked it. If you're into superheroes and origin stories, I totally recommend it. And now back to Katie.
Thank you. That concludes this episode of Forever Young Adult Lovers of YA Lit. I, at the end of my book, Instant Karma, because I, like Steve, like to look at who's reviewed the books. If they're names that I know, then I'm already going to be like, check, yes, this is my book going in my cart. But I also really kind of like reading the acknowledgments at the end of a book, because you'd be surprised at how many of our favorite YA authors mention other YA authors in their acknowledgments as test readers, as members of the same publishing house, or like their friends. So it's cool to see how, we really do live in a small world, and it's cool to see how some of our favorites interact in ways that you wouldn't. So I think we are off to a banging start with our books of 2021 so far. It sounds like the theme to me tonight was being surprised by books, both good and bad. Like Misty said, sometimes you find a book and you think you're going to love it and you don't. But just because you don't love it doesn't mean somebody else is not going to totally be over the moon for it. And that's really our job, both as educators and lovers of reading, is to recommend all of the books to you, whether or not we like them. Because again, what's my cup of tea is not going to be your cup of tea. So, surprise seemed to be the word of the theme of this evening's book talks. But at the end of this book, like I said, I was reading the acknowledgments. Marissa Mayer put in a book or a quote that says, "Our books are friends for life." Oh, so cute. I saw it last night when I was reading, and I was like, yep, that's going to be my closing quote for book club tomorrow. So our books are friends for life, and our books bring us friends for life. So on that note, my friends, have a good evening. Have a good rest of the month of January, and we will see you for our next episode.
Bye.
Bye.